Yes, I am. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Spiritual Threads. And this today will be video 5. And today I'm going to be talking about Ben and his addiction, and this will be part 2. And first of all, I want to mention a colleague and a friend of mine by the name of Reverend Karen Lee Sampson. And the reason for that is that when Ben first moved into my home in 2013, he certainly was aware that I had a friend and colleague by the name of Karen. And anyway, Karen, before I get into the story, Karen is a very gifted individual. She is a psychic, she's a medium, also a great healer. And Karen, in the past, of course, had done a lot of work in regards to mind over matter. I mean, she could bend metal materials, she could walk on fire, and that's an actual fact. And so anyway, she's a very gifted individual. And so like I said, Ben knew that I had a friend and colleague by the name of Karen. And so anyway, getting into, after he had been here for a few months, Karen and I, of course, would have various phone conversations. And Ben would, there was times when I was talking to Karen, I would simply hand the phone to Ben, and Ben would talk to Karen, and they would have great conversations, and he would laugh along, and he would tell different jokes, and she would laugh, and she would say, she would invite him down to see her in Florida, and Ben would say he'd love to go to Florida, and so forth. So anyway, this continued on for a while, and then as the months went on, probably 9 or 10 months later, into the year of 2014, Karen at one point in time decided that she would do psychic reading for Ben. And so this she did. And of course, when she's doing a reading, Karen, like myself, she channels directly from spirit. And so anyway, she decided to do this reading, which she did. And so after the reading, she had written everything down that she had got from Spirit, and wrote this up and sent it in an email to Ben. And of course, during this time, I was totally unaware that Karen had done the reading for Ben, and in fact, I did not know she had sent it to him by email, because Ben did not tell me anything that he had received it from her, and Karen never mentioned it. So anyway, as the time went on, I would occasionally mention to Ben Karen's name, or mention her just in a conversation, and I noticed that he would basically ignore it. And if I made any reference to Karen, he continued to ignore it, and was very abrupt in his manner whenever I mentioned her name. And so I found that kind of strange. And anyway, as the time went on, I still wasn't aware of that she had done the reading for him. And of course, Karen, being the wonderful individual that she is, when it came his birthday, she would always send him gifts at Christmas time. So she would include his birthday gift. She would put that in with his Christmas gifts or whatever. And so I noticed that he would receive these, but he would just ignore them, basically. And of course, Karen and I always exchanged gifts and so forth at Christmas and birthday and so forth. And so I just found that kind of odd. And anyway, later on, about a year or so later, at one point in time, excuse me, Karen had mentioned and said to me about doing this reading for Ben and sending it to him by email. And she simply said to me, she said, "It's so strange," she said, "that I've never heard from him And she said he had never acknowledged anything about it. And so anyway, later on, I had found out from some other ones that Ben had mentioned it to others, and had simply said that the reading was entirely all lies and it was all made up. And he was infuriated about what Karen had said, that had informed him as to what Spirit had said to her about Ben and his future and so forth. Anyway, as the time progressed, I did learn that what had angered him so intently was, and intensely, that he was infuriated because she had told him and said that Spirit had told her that he was gay and that he needed to accept his own self-identity as to who he was and what he was. Of course, she wrote that in an email, which any of us would do that communicate with Spirit. Naturally, we channel directly, so we're going to state what was stated to us. After all, we're only the messengers. And so anyway, he, from that day till even this, he's never communicated with Karen. Whenever I would mention her name, he would just completely ignore it, and obviously it infuriated him, and he never has mentioned since to me of ever receiving any communication from her, and he never mentioned that reading. That information, of course, came to me directly from Karen, and that's how I became aware of it. And what I want to say on that subject is that for Ben, I feel that he is just totally ignoring, and he's not accepting himself for who he truly is. And I just find it so ironic that Ben would tell me from time to time while he was living here what a strong Christian that he was, how he believed in God, and that God, of course, was guiding him and had told him, and would continue to tell him, that everything that he was doing right. And I would like to say this to Ben. In fact, so I'm assuming that as a result that God is telling Ben, of course, to be a drug addict, that he's telling Ben to live in shelters, that he's telling Ben to be homeless and on the streets, that he's telling Ben not to have any employment or any form of income, and in fact a place to live. So I would say to Ben, if that be the case, and if that is the God that you have, Ben, let me tell you something. You can have that God. Thank you very much. I'll keep the God that I have. Because the God that I have is about love and light. He's not about any form of evilness. And quite frankly, Ben, as a drug addict, you're connected with a great force of evilness when you're dealing with the drug world. So, as I said, my friend, you can have the God that you have, and I'll certainly keep the God that I believe in and that I have. And as a result, I do feel that as a Christian, and of course Ben always talked about being such a strong Christian. Well, in fact, we're all Christians. After all, spiritualists are Christians as well. And I would say this to you, Ben, seeing that the fact that you're such a strong Christian, as you say that you are, why not rise above it? Because I truly do believe that a true Christian would believe so much in true Christianity that they themselves would be able to forgive someone. And quite frankly, I don't feel that Karen needs to be forgiven for anything. What would she need to be forgiven about and for? Speaking the truth? I would say to you, Ben, I think that you have a lot to actually question yourself about by accusing all the rest of us as liars, and yet for yourself that you're telling the truth? When in fact, Ben, I will say this, that all addicts, or most addicts, are pathological liars. Because in fact, they have to be a liar in order to continue their addiction. Because they lie every day about the why they're being an addict, and what they do to continue their addiction is lies. So from that point of view, I do feel that if you're such a true Christian, Ben, rise above that. After all, isn't being a Christian, you know, there's such a word that really, Ben, I think maybe you would be considering, and I think that a true Christian would consider, and that word is simply forgiveness. So whatever happened to that, Ben, seeing that you're such a strong Christian that you claim to be? I think there's a real problem here. And therefore, Ben, I think you think that you're a Christian. And when you say about your God telling you that everything that you do and have done is correct and is right, I question that as well. I don't think that living your life as a drug addict or as any addict is proper and appropriate. And I'll tell you one thing, I find it very strange that God would be telling you that. Anyway, everybody, I thank you for joining me today, and I want to say that in the next video, which will be video 6, I'm going to be talking about another one of my clients, by a fellow by the name of Bradley, and also I'll be talking about another fellow, Douglas, as well. And anyway, I will be discussing their addictions, and that will be concluding the videos in regards to addiction, at least for now. And of course there'll be other videos that I will be doing that will be discussing a number of other topics and subjects, such as what I had mentioned in my first video, which was video 1. And so in the meantime, I would also like to just remind you that if you haven't as of yet picked up a copy of my first book titled Standing in the Shadows, The Light, by all means do so. It is available at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. And so anyway, everyone, I thank you for joining me today. And in the meantime, take care, keep safe, may God bless, and I'll see you soon.